How does it feel to lose a pet?
You muzzled Appa? Tell me where Appa is!
I traded him to some merchants.
No.
Appa's Lost Days is the most heartbreaking Avatar episode ever. Now, many of you might argue that Tales of Ba Sing Se is definitely more heartbreaking, but if you watched it, you'll realize that in itself, the episode is fairly lighthearted. It's just the ending moments of Iroh's and Momo's tales that are truly heartbreaking. But Appa's Lost Days is not an episode for the faint-hearted. There is no comic relief like in the desert, there is no upbeat side story like in Tales of Ba Sing Se, and there is no happy ending either. In this episode, we follow along with Appa throughout the last 4 weeks. The last 4 weeks of desperation and heartbreak. And the last time we saw this gentle giant was 6 episodes ago, where he was being muzzled and taken away by a group of wicked sandbenders. Ever since, we have been following along with Aang and the gang as they try to battle their way out of the desert and find a safe passage to Ba Sing Se. As Aang, for moments at a time, gives up his air nomad ways to turn into a confused and enraged version of himself. As the gang is trying to think of the bigger picture and save the world, while Aang on the other side is being a complete and nuclear prick. But we are not mad at him, and neither are his friends. We understand him and we feel it with him. The sadness, the loss, the insecurity, the heartbreak, and the anger.
Let them take Appa! Why didn't you stop them?
I couldn't! The library was sinking!
You just didn't care! You never liked Appa! You wanted him gone!
Aang, stop it.
It's a story arc that hits all the right heartstrings and that hits its climax in Appa's Lost Days. An episode that did a lot for this universe. An episode that connected past and present and set up a bitter future. And it's also an episode that, like most episodes in this TV show, tries to teach a very important lesson. But more of that later. The episode starts off 4 weeks ago. We are in the middle of revisiting Appa's capture, a scene that is now even crueler because we get to experience it from Appa's perspective. And thinking about it, that is part of why this episode is so heartbreaking in the first place. After Appa was stolen, we got to see how heartbroken everyone in the group was. We got to realize how important he was for the group and how without him they almost died in the desert, and how crucial he is not only for Aang but for the whole story. We learned how a silent companion can be more important than it appears. Something that is often forgotten in entertainment because we are used to focus on the characters that resemble us the most or on the characters that lead the dialogue. But maybe sometimes we should remember to focus on the silent characters, to give them more attention before it's too late and they get taken away. After being captured and bemused, Appa gets sold to a nearby circus where he, a flying bison, is shackled and forced into a cage that barely fits him. Where his freedom-loving mind becomes his detriment. Where I probably realized as a kid that circuses are nothing more than just a glorified animal torture camp. But there is a silver lining, right? Appa is able to flee. After meeting a young boy that reminds him of his companion for life, Aang, he finds the courage and leaves. Finally free for the first time in days or maybe even weeks, he sets off for the desert where he last saw his buddy. But once he arrives there, there is nothing. No library, no Aang, no Momo, no one. Only sand.
I don't like sand. It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere.
I'm not entirely sure why this scene in particular resonates so strongly with me, but it might be because Appa is trying to dig up the library like a dog would, and I have a dog myself, and she and Appa look very similar, at least in my opinion. So just imagining her having to go through any of this on her own kills me, but she will never have to go through any of this, I'll make sure of it. But sadly, Appa doesn't have this privilege. After leaving the place where the library used to be, he sets off through the desert and only then realizes how hungry he is. And then we get to witness a myriad of heart-wrenching scenes where we can't help but feel for this lovable giant, a being that is incapable of betrayal or spite, having to go through so much betrayal and spite. And then we get this scene. Whatever happens next doesn't matter. This scene in itself is heartbreaking enough because Appa hates caves. He despises them, he can't stand them, and for a flying bison this also makes a lot of sense. But it's not just in retrospect that we find that out. A few episodes ago we were already introduced to this idea.
Yeah, thanks for the help, but Appa hates going underground. And we need to do whatever makes Appa most comfortable.
But now Appa has gotten to a point where he is so desperate that he will deliberately enter a cave for food. But we the viewer are not treated to a satisfied and happy Appa on the other side. No, we get him being chased by a swarm of buzzard wasps. But there is a silver lining, right? Appa fights them off and flees with whatever strength he has left. Later, he then finds a shelter, a place with water and food and a place for him to rest. And in his dreams, we get this scene.
I guess this means we'll always be together.
The connection between a human and his companion is obvious to most of us. We love them with all our heart and they feel the same about us. They will always be an important part of our lives, but to them, we will be their entire life. It's a special bond and one that will teach any human many good qualities, a bond that makes this episode all the more heartbreaking. And once we arrive at this scene, we realize how much this is impacting these two beloved characters. Now, the bond between a human and his pet is very strong, but the bond between an air nomad and his sky bison is even stronger. And the bond between an avatar and his animal companion is for eternity. The story of Avatar Roku shows this best. Once an avatar dies and enters the spirit realm, his animal companion follows him there. A bond that can never be broken, and in Aang and Appa's case, it's all the more tragic. Aang and Appa are the only aspect of each other's lives that is fixed. Both were trapped in an iceberg for 100 years. Both have lost their entire family and all that they had valued. The only thing that they know will ever stay the same is the fact that they will stick together forever, even long after their bodies have given up. But for now they are separated, for weeks at a time without knowing where the other is. Appa then wakes up and gets scared off by the owners of the hut and out of exhaustion crash lands onto a far off field, where then this happens. No breaks. This episode does not care what you want, it cares about hammering a very important point into you. Appa has to fight off this porcupine and he's obviously going to win, but not on score. The fight goes on, and then once the fight is finally over, he tries to pull out one of the needles out of his skin, where we are treated to one of only 2 instances of blood in this entire TV show. You see what I mean? This episode has a lot going for it, a lot of sadness that is. But there is a silver lining, right? After days of desperation, the Kyoshi warriors find him and get him back to his original self. After weeks of hardship, we are finally treated to a silver lining. Long ago, Appa was captured and tortured. But finally, peace could be found once the Kyoshi warriors helped him out. But then, everything changed when Azula attacked. And Mei and Ty Lee also helped out a little. But yeah, no, this episode is not trying to make it easy on Appa for sure. He does escape though, but at what cost? Appa goes on to travel on for days, and then the episode finally seems to head into a more lighthearted direction. We meet Guru Patik and he helps out Appa find Aang. So Appa makes a decision to go after his friend. He makes his way towards Ba Sing Se, and once he's there, we finally get it. The silver lining we've been waiting for. 22 minutes of heartbreak, but it's here now. Aang's bison whistle can finally be heard. Not only by Appa, but by us the viewer as well. It's finally over. There's no silver lining here. This sounds harsh, but sometimes this is the case. We are often told in media that hope will get us there. Hope will make the change we are looking for. Hope will make the difference. And they're not wrong. Hope is incredibly important. No matter the hardship we face as humans, we can never forget to have hope. But, and this is very important, hope will not change anything on its own. Hope will be the drive that will allow us to keep going. It will be the fuel that will make sure that if we ever lose our pets, we won't give up until we find them again. But it will not be the driving force. That has to be you. If you lost something, always hope for the best and prepare for the worst. And once you've done that, make sure that the best is the most likely outcome. Go out there and look. Go out there and sacrifice. Because if we never give up, a silver lining will be found. But only if we actively go after it as well. Hope alone won't make the difference. It will keep your will alive, but you have to also convert this into actions. This episode feels like it has to have a happy ending. Considering where this episode is placed in the season, and the fact that they didn't even have to show the perspective from Appa, makes us hope that the episode will end with Aang and Appa Appa finally together, that this will be the purpose of the episode. But that's not what happens. We only get to this point after the gang and Appa respectively took action once again, after they sacrificed so much to get to where they hoped to be. But often, just like in this episode, we have to realize that it will not come without sacrifice. It will take a lot to get there. In the show, for example, Suki and the Kyoshi warriors got captured because of it, and Jad had to give up his life for the freedom of Appa and the gang. In real life, many of us may have to go through similar struggles. Don't forget this episode when that happens. For now, we're stuck at home and we're hoping that things will go back to normal soon. But we also have to actively do something about it, because hope alone won't make the difference. Don't expect the silver lining to just appear. Go out there and forge the silver yourself. Thanks a lot, guys. This channel is all about looking at video games and pop culture from a different perspective, about digging deeper into the meaning of life and how we can get there with video games, movies and TV shows. How we can learn valuable life lessons from them, and every now and then I'll be analyzing them as well. So if that interests you, maybe subscribe? Maybe hit the bell to be notified? What about that, Yeah? Okay, good. See ya!
Execute Order 66.
Yes, Lord Sidious.